While we're waiting for people to file in, I can just tell you that the process is going slow. So it's not necessarily, I mean, it's kind of a combination of things. You know, I'm struggling with a couple of some bad performances, and you know, that's expected. But I'm also, my schedule has been, you know, pretty packed this week, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to dedicate like large chunks of time to grading the papers. So I feel like I'm behind a little bit. Hopefully I'm going to get more of this done tomorrow. I'm hoping to have your class done by Friday. So I probably will expect to get these back to you on Monday. If things go really well tomorrow, then you know, maybe I get back to you on Friday. But I'm hoping to spend pretty much all day tomorrow just working on those papers. Paper 5 due on December 2nd. I've had some people contact me about paper topics, and I just want to remind you it's the same process this time around, right? Same process, meaning condition, 2 treatment options, right? There's no other option, right? It's don't send me an email asking me if you can investigate something, right? I understand that that's an issue. I understand there might be, you know, like a treatment out there that's getting a lot of attention recently, and everybody wants to kind of analyze whether it's dangerous or not dangerous or something like that. I'm not interested in that, because the only thing you are going to do with a topic like that is to tell me what we already know, right? Unless you're actually performing the treatment and doing something with the treatment, you can't give me anything original. What is original is your ability to analyze and evaluate research on 2 sides of competing interests. So when I say do the same thing you did in paper number 4, for paper number 5, don't ask me to do something different, right? Do what I ask you to do, because there's a purpose behind that, and that is the intellectual challenge of being able to break the literature down, synthesize the arguments, figure out where the validity and reliability rests, right? Figuring out the operational definitions and those kind of things, right? It takes a lot of brain work to be able to get there, right? Just summarizing a bunch of research that's already been written is not brain work, right? That any freshman can do that. So we're looking, you know, to increase the intellectual challenges. So what we're going to be talking about today and for the next couple of days is this whole issue about sentence variation techniques. You don't have to get there, but if you want to get there, I'm on page 89 of the text. And what I'm doing here in chapter 4, page 89, is I'm talking to you about sentence variation techniques. What we're finding is that in many cases, when you are struggling intellectually with the content of your paper, you tend to resort to spitting out information in short bursts. In other words, you're not managing the information for continuity and flow for the purpose of moving ideas across the page. You are more inclined to just spit out, here's a sentence, here's a sentence, here's a sentence. This often comes out with, you know, the failure to create transitions. I mean, one of the things I'm finding to be really problematic with paper 4s right now is that people aren't correlating the sources. They're just writing, here's a bunch of information about a source, and then here's another bunch of information about a source, and you're just taping those things together and calling it a paragraph, right? That's not effective. That's not meaningful at all, right? I mean, your job is to synthesize those arguments down, correlate the sources, show how they relate to each other so that we can focus on the argument. And what happens a lot of times in those papers, and what I'm reading so far, is that people get to the end of the paragraph and they're just done summarizing a source and they just stop. Right? Because they don't have the right intellectual focus, right? They're not focused on the argument anymore. They're just interested in summarizing the sources. Why is that? Because they don't know enough about the subject matter in order to talk about it intelligently. That's what's happening, right? It means you didn't give yourself enough time to do the work that you were supposed to do. You didn't digest the research. You don't know what it means to the argument. So what do you resort to? I'm going to summarize the source. I'm going to summarize the source. I'm going to summarize another source, and I'm going to make them a paragraph, right? That's not what this is intended to do. So what I'm telling you today needs to be applied to the next phase of writing so that you don't make those kind of mistakes, right? I mean, that you are synthesizing the information down and managing the information appropriately so this comes out as writing an argument, that you're analyzing and evaluating the texts. I know that you can summarize sources, right? Anybody who makes it to college can. So for you to summarize a bunch of sources and take them together and call it a paragraph, and then take a bunch of those things together and call it a paper, right, is telling me that you're not prepared to move on to the next level of professional education. Right? So expect some bad things. Right? The papers that I'm seeing so far, right? I mean, I've only gotten through probably about 8 or 9 of them, right? But you know, I'm about 50-50 and pass and fail. So it's not looking good, right? I mean, so okay. We're gonna get another opportunity to rescue it with paper 5. So we better start thinking about things in different ways and, you know, listening to what I'm telling you to do. So what I'm seeing happening in your papers can be boiled down to really a sentence level problem where you see short, simple sentences kind of stuck together like this, right? And I realize this is kind of 3rd grader writing. Sarah's a good student. Sarah studies in the library, right? Those 2 sentences no one would write so rigidly. But I want you to know that we have all sorts of different mechanisms at our disposal in order to combine these sentences, and that when we start combining sentences, we start manipulating sentence order and we start putting pieces of information in certain locations, we start to change meanings. So in this situation, Sarah, good student, studies in the library. Or in the library, Sarah studies to become a good student. In other words, the focus is on Sarah studying. And this one is that Sarah studies too. And in this one, studying in the library helps Sarah to do something. So it's the process of studying at a particular place, right? Where here it was just Sarah studies, maybe in the library. Here is studying in the library. Notice the emphasis is on the library here because it's in the front of the sentence as part of the subject. Or how about in this case, studying in the library, right? In other words, that's kind of not really essential, but this is the independent clause. Sarah has become a good student. The whole process here is about Sarah becoming something better. So what I've got here is a bunch of different ways of combining sentences together, using different types of phrases, using different types of sentences in order to mix things up and manage information so that it reads effectively. So what I want to do today is I want to talk to you about the different types of phrases that are out there that are going to be used for your disposal, right? So we're going to practice learning about these phrases. This is on page 90 if you want to just make a note to yourself where it is. These different types of phrases are going to be used for different purposes in order to recognize emphasis. And essentially what I probably should do at this point is maybe kind of stop for a second and talk to you about, you know, how we process information. And this really goes back to the kind of same conversations that we had before about, you know, the verb-based writing strategies. When we talked about how to locate information, we're trying to put a focus on the verb because the verb is the most impressive part of the sentence. It's the thing that shows action. It's the thing that creates that visualization of action. It's the kind of thing your brain retains. So there's some things to think about here about that. So what I'm ultimately saying is that the relationship between the subject and the verb is the most important relationship because the verb is creating the action, and that visualization of action is the thing your brain retains, right? It's not people, places, and things. It's not, you know, objects. It's not nouns. Right? It's the reason why we worked away from nominalization, right? We're working toward the verb because the verb is the most important part of speech. It's the thing that creates that action, and that action is what we retain. So what this ultimately means is that the relationship between the subject and verb is the primary purpose in your sentence. In other words, your sentence gathers the most meaning from that relationship, the subject and verb. that subject and verb is housed in your independent clause. So what does this say? It says that the most important piece of information that you can write, primary importance for your reader, is what's housed in the independent clause. So there will be introductory phrases, there will be non-essential elements, there'll be introductory dependent clauses, there'll be dependent clauses that come in the middle of a sentence, that come at the end of a sentence. Some of them will be essential, some of them will be non-essential. Whatever, the main focus of the sentence needs to be in that relationship between the subject and the verb, because the verb is the most important piece of information that you can get. So what I'm trying to tell you ultimately here is that whatever is housed in your independent clause should be the main point of your sentence. Everything else should be inconsequential. It's got lower meaning. So what are those other elements, and what do they mean in terms of importance? Well, if we know that the independent clause is the most important thing, then we can know that there are other types of things which work around it. What we talked about with our rules of punctuation were two really important things: introductory elements and non-essential elements. Right? So as you could probably figure out, right, those items that are of secondary importance would be those introductory elements. So anything that comes in front of the independent clause. Right? So it could be a phrase. It might be a dependent clause. Doesn't matter. Whatever's in front of that independent clause is relevant to the sentence, but it's not the most important thing in the sentence. Hope that makes sense to you. And then those items that are of the least importance, the lowest level of importance, would be those non-essential elements. Right? And we talked about those, right? Setting off things in commas in the middle of a sentence. Yeah.
What does the after phrase stand for?
Dependent clauses.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Anything that comes in the middle of a sentence that's surrounded with commas, right, is an alert to the reader that that information is so insignificant that we should be able to read right over that information, and the sentence should still be able to make sense. It's the reason why when a lot of you end your sentences with a dependent clause, and so many of you will say that, study X did this while study Y did that. And you'll take that dependent clause, that while study Y does things, at the end of your sentence, and you'll want to put a comma in there for I don't know what reason, right? I mean, if you're comparing two articles and you're taking an important piece of information and you're putting it in a comma, you're setting it off with a comma, you're making it non-essential. You're telling the reader that it doesn't have to be in there in order for the sentence to make sense. The whole purpose of your paper is to compare data. So why would you make that dependent clause non-essential? Doesn't make any sense, right? It's only because you see words and you react to them, right? You see the word while and you think that's a dependent clause, I should set that off with a comma. No, you only set off things that are non-essential elements with commas. You only set off introductory elements with commas, parenthetic elements with commas. And we've got other rules of comma use. This is the reason why we went over those things, right? So that you know the difference. If you don't know the difference between those things, you're in trouble, right? This is going to be a disaster for you. But, many are called, few are chosen. What you can get out of this also is that location might make a difference in terms of importance. In other words, if you have information that's coming at the end of a sentence, that's probably pretty important. Because what usually comes at the end of a sentence is your independent clause. You usually set up your sentences to have the less important information start it and then the most important piece of information end it. Independent clauses usually finish your sentence. Sure, sometimes we have dependent clauses that operate at the end of sentences. That happens. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not important, right? What it does, though, is it kind of subverts this order that I'm talking about. Your brain processes information in a certain way, right? This is what cognitive psychologists call the magic U. I don't know if any of you paid attention to this in Psych 103, but you might have gotten this. The magic U, right? which is the way the brain processes information, meaning that whatever comes at the beginning of your paper, sentence, presentation, whatever is there at the beginning of the sentence is somewhat important if we're charting this on levels of importance. In other words, if the importance is increasing as we go up here and as time moves forward this way, right? If this is somewhat important at the beginning of the sentence, this is the middle of the sentence, and obviously this has low importance. And what here is at the end of the sentence is the most important. Right? I mean, that's the way the brain processes information, either at the sentence level, at the paragraph level, at the paper level. When you walk into a class, the first few minutes of what the professor says is sticking in your brain. What happens in the middle of the class, you tend to kind of forget about. But what happens at the end of the class is the things that you kind of retain. It's the reason why when some people who actually go to school and are taught how to teach, right, are always taught that, hey, at the end of class, you need to reinforce your objectives. You need to go back over the important things that you want your students to retain, because what happens at the end of the class is what's more important to the student, right? It's the way our brains process information. So as you can see, right, here's our secondary, here's our tertiary, here's our primary levels of importance. So if we're thinking about how we're going to reach our readers, we need to think about putting our information in certain locations and using certain strategies to help make that information stand out as being more important than others. So obviously, information that's secondary in importance, if the end is primary importance, the beginning is secondary importance, and what's in the middle of a sentence that's surrounded by commas is the lowest of importance. Right? These strategies, right? Establishing first, second, and third degrees of importance, knowing independent clauses, introductory elements, non-essential elements, things that come at the end, the beginning, and the middle, have meaning. How you strategize with your sentences and with your paragraphs and with your paper as a whole, right, should follow these general principles, because that's what your readers' brains are trained to look for. So when we think about this in terms of sentence level issues, we can put it in this perspective. There's 5 different phrases you're going to use for the writing of this paper, and you're going to use each one of these 2 times for your quiz grade out of 10. So I talked about the other day when we introduced the paper. These 5 phrases are very easy to understand. We talked about them in passing as we went through the rules of comma usage, and we talked about them throughout the editing process of the papers. But now is the time to put some definitions behind each one of them so that you know exactly what we're talking about. The 5 types of phrases that you need to be using are these, and notice the levels of importance that are associated with each one. So the gerund is a phrase that actually operates as the subject of a sentence. It always ends in ing, right? And then what we're talking about here, studying in the library allows Sarah to be an exceptional student. What we're talking about here is the subject of the sentence being studying, and the verb being allows. So studying allows Sarah to be an exceptional student. Studying, many people will look at that word and say, well, that looks like an action to me. No, it's not. What we're talking about is the act of studying, which makes it a person, place, or thing. So a gerund is an ing word, which usually means the act of. It operates as a noun. It operates as the subject of your sentence. So when you are using these gerunds in your paper and labeling them, right, make a note of this because you need to know how to label your sentence or your phrases effectively. You need to underline everything from the word studying to the verb. So studying often in the library, that's the gerund phrase. The word studying is a gerund. You're not going to underline allows because allows is the verb. It's a different part of speech. So when you're doing this, studying often in the library will be underlined. You'll label that a gerund. Now notice that the gerund is of primary importance because it does this, right? It's the subject that attaches to the verb. It's the independent clause. It's the main focus of the sentence. Everybody see that? Right? So that's why the gerund gets primary importance. Those elements that are secondary importance are introductory elements. So we have different phrases that operate out there as introductory elements, and they are participles, infinitives, and prepositions. You've heard these words already. We've talked about them in the rules of punctuation. We're going to go over them now so that you understand exactly what and the chapter explains all these things to you as well, so you can start reading about this on page 91. But the participial phrase are those words, sometimes they end in ing, but they can also end in T, D, ED, and N. All right, T, D, ED, and N. Those words are adjectives. In other words, study, right? To study is the root form of this, the infinitive form. So studying, right, or studied, or known, or disappointed, or whatever. There's a bunch of different examples out there we can use for this. This is the dangling modifier problem, right? Many people are writing these introductory phrases like this. This group of words, this is what makes a participle a participle. It's an ing, T, D, ed, or N word acting as an adjective, which means that it modifies, it explains, describes the subject of the sentence, which is Sarah. Who studies often in the library? Sarah does. So this group of words, because it's introductory in nature, right, it gets secondary importance. It's an introductory phrase. I need you to know how to use these, right? And you will not get credit for that if you create a dangling modifier, right? So if you said studying often in the library, students do something, well, it could be students studying in the library, or if you said something studying often, comma, the library is open, then I would say the library doesn't study often. That's a dangling modifier. So studying in the library, there's your phrase. So when you're marking this, you're going to underline or highlight all the way up to the comma. Anytime you have an introductory element, a secondary level of importance, you mark all the way up to the comma. And you leave the independent clause on its own. If you didn't do your job at the beginning of the semester to recognize what independent clauses are and those kind of things, you're going to have a hell of a time with this assignment. Right? It's the reason why some people do well and some people do poorly. The infinitive is the to plus verb combination. That's that root form of the verb. Right? We talked about infinitive phrases previously. We'll reinforce it here. Again, it is an adjective. It's describing the subject of the sentence. So the participle and the infinitive do the same job. They just do it in different ways. This one, ing, td, e, n, or n. This one, to plus verb. But they both act as adjectives describing the subject. Who's studying? Sarah. Who's becoming? Sarah. Both of those get secondary levels of importance. The prepositional phrase, words that show relationship, in, on, over, under, below, beyond, above, right? All those words that show relationship. Those prepositions, right, if they come at the front of the sentence, right, so in the study by Jones, there's your prepositional phrase. Mark all the way up to the comma. Same thing with the infinitive. Mark all the way up to the comma. You want to demonstrate that you're using that element to introduce the independent clause, which is your most important piece of information. So these three, the participle, the infinitive, and the prepositional, will be used to kind of shake up sentence structure, right, for the purpose of manipulating things and making ideas flow, but they're also for a way to reduce certain pieces of information. In other words, the main point in this sentence is that Sarah's become an exceptional student. In this one, Sarah studies in the library. In this one, Sarah studies often and has become a better student. Those are the main points. In the library, to become, studying often, those things are secondary in importance. They're not the most important piece of the information. They're relevant to the sentence, but they're not the most important piece of the sentence. The impositive phrase, though, is the group of words that renames the noun before it It comes right after the subject, and it's surrounded by commas. It's a non-essential element. That's why it's third-degree importance, right? It's down here because it's surrounded by commas, it's in the middle of the sentence. It's a non-essential element. So, not important, somewhat important, very important. We're doing this for the reason of creating sentence variation as well. For example, right? When you have a piece of paper, I mean, one of the reasons why, I mean, the basic purpose, and people will, talk about writing at the, at elementary level, and they'll talk about, you need to make your sentences, move, and there should be an up and down feel to your sentence structure and those kind of things. Okay, that makes sense. We're doing this to create variety, right? So that you've got different ways to start sentences and to make sentence structure. So you've got different tools to create that continuity. That's one reason for doing it. But more than that, you should be thinking of it in this way, right? I mean, no one wants to read a bunch of sentences that, Jones did this, Jones did that, the study accomplished this, right? And that's a lot of what I got in those papers when people didn't know what they were talking about, right? Because they're just they're just kind of spit out something, right? They know they got to write a paper, they know they got to talk about the studies, so they just vomit this information up into the page with just short, simple sentences, right? Shows that you have a lack of control, right? Doesn't mean that you're using the information to make an argument. It just means that I need to summarize something because I got a paper due, right? That's the panic that I see in your voices. But more than that, you need to be able to use these techniques to strategize with that continuity and flow, and then disrupting that continuity and flow to draw attention. If I'm writing, like if you pick up, I don't know, some kind of promotional material, right? You'll see pictures and all those kind of things. And Marketing 101 will tell you that the last thing you want to do is give people a wall of words, right? And most people want to read something, but the images, right? The tables, the graphs, the bullet points or whatever, right? Those are the things that your attention gravitates toward because there's this white space, right? In other words, there's something that disrupts the wall of words. I'm going to gravitate toward this, the picture, the bullet points. The same thing can be accomplished here with these strategies. That instead of writing in choppy sentences where it's just the same kind of sentence structure over and over again, what you can do is you can create that kind of sing-songy approach, right? You can create that movement and flow, that up and down nature of bringing your sentences together with introductory elements and non-essential elements, and things can flow. And then when you kind of break that rhythm and hit your reader with a short, simple sentence, right? The reader's attention gravitates toward that short, simple sentence. So as kind of a word to the wise, right? You want to manage your information appropriately. You want to hit your reader with a good point, right? Do that after you've got like long, involved sentence structure, and you hit that reader with a short sentence that says, hey, this is my most important point. Disrupt the flow, and your reader's attention will gravitate toward it. Same thing happens with just your argument, right? I mean, put the most important pieces of your argument in those shorter, simpler sentences so that you can say, look, all this means this. That's what you're trying to get across, right? Which is get to your argument. What I'm finding is I'm just getting lots of short, simple sentences that are all trying to be important. So they're all taking on the same weight. So lists of data are coming across in a paragraph all with the same weight as the concluding sentence because they all look the same. They all have the same structure. There's nothing different about them that gets me to the concluding point. Everybody follow what I'm saying here? Okay. So there's method to the madness, right? We're not just doing this because I'm crazy. We're doing this because it's going to mean something. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to take a look at some of these sentences that are over here on page 92 and 93. Now, if you don't have your textbook, I can put this up in a different form so you can see it better. Maybe I'll do it this way. All right, I've got 4 of the 6 sentences up here from, this is on page 95. These 2 sentences are 2, yes,
For the a positive, would that be underlining in between the commas?
in between the commas, yes, thank you.
We don't include the comments in it, or just.
If you want to include the commas, you can, but it's not, it's the phrase that matters, not the punctuation. Okay. All right, so what you've got here, right, are 2 sentences here that have 2 independent clauses and 2 sentences here that have 3 independent clauses. All right, what I want you to do is I want you to pick one of these sentences, all right? I mean, these are probably going to be just more convoluted just because there's more to deal with here, right? So if you're just getting your head around this concept, pick number 1 or number 2, right? Actually, there's 5 and 6 are up here at the top of 95. If any of you have it, there's these right here. But essentially, what I want you to do is I want you to pick. Maybe we should just start with everybody doing this. Depends how much time we have. I guess we got a little bit of time to do this. What's today? The 9th?
Yes.
Yeah, 9th already. Pick any one of these. All right. What I want to see is that I'm going to look at as many as I can find, right, from you doing this. But just know that these are going to be the 2 harder ones to deal with. But what I want you to do is I want you to combine these sentences together into one sentence, right? And I want you to rewrite that sentence 5 different times using the different phrases each time. So I want you to create a gerund, right, for primary importance. Then I want you to create 3 introductory sentence or introductory elements with participles, infinitives, and prepositions. And then I want you to do the non-essential one. Okay, so you're going to perform all 5 of the phrases, and you're going to show me like all 5 of the levels of importance, and I'm going to put those up, and we're going to talk about them, and we're going to talk about whether you're getting this or not. All right? So if you want to just tackle 1 and 4 first, great, and then we'll do 2 and 3 later. Okay, that's fine. But start practicing doing this.
Can you do like having been committed to the union? Is that having?
ING word, as long as it's acting as an adjective modifying the subject of the sentence, sure. Yep. Or are you trying to do a gerund?
Oh, yeah, I was asking like for a gerund.
So what would be your verb? Or maybe take out the having, just write being.
Being as an
Yeah, that might give you a better approach. Where's that? You know, you can't just say one sentence. That's not a complete sentence anyways. Stop. ING word has to be an adjective describing the subject of the sentence. Alabama wasn't admitting itself. See the problem there? You're saying admitting, it's a unit, so whoever was doing the admitting would have to be the subject of that sentence, right? That's why you gotta be careful doing this. No, same things here. You just wrote the same sentence twice.
No, I said admitted.
No, being Alabama is described in Alabama. If you're gonna do a gerund, you have to have a verb next, no comma. Right? Gerund is just a subject and verb. Being did something. You just wrote the same, you just did the same thing because you have an introductory phrase. Both of these are describing Alabama. Right? So you just did two participial phrases. Okay. So, no, not participle because this is the gerund. You just did this. You just changed admitting to admitted. Right? For a participle, you gotta have who did the admitting, right? Or what was being admitted. Okay, so all the way up to the verb, you're gonna label. Not the verb. Don't underline that verb.
What is that?
That's your gerund, right? Being allowed, right? There's your subject, there's your verb.
But we said that most words.
Okay, so which one are you doing? Participle. Okay, organizing, research, Alabama was. Okay, so Alabama was organized. Okay, that's the participle. Gerund, organizing. Yeah, that's a little awkward. Organizing admitted. Yeah, I think that doesn't. I don't know if that necessary. Okay. Right, for gerund, right, object to the verb allowed. Okay, good. Now give me the others in there.
Okay.
Okay, prepositional, right? That's an introductory prepositional phrase, so that's what you can just write after the comma, and you just label that as prepositional. Okay. The union wasn't being organized as a territory. That's why it's under modified, right? Now, this is an ED word. So that is actually the participial phrase. Because that is Alabama was organized as a territory. Right? So who was organized? Alabama was. So because it's an ED word, it's not a preposition. Preposition in, out, over, under, above, those words. Feel free to manipulate these sentences so that you can make these things work.
All right, so I'm sorry. When you got first one, that's it.
Yeah. But you're only labeling up to this. You don't want to underline your verb.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the other one. And then this is what?
This was a participle.
That's right, because Alabama was organized. Good. Right, being a territory allowed Alabama to be admitted, so being allowed, subject, verb, return, right? You're gonna label all the way up to 1870, right? You're not gonna go any further than that. Then what do we got there? ING word, comma, describing Alabama, or your participle. So label all the way up to the comma. Underline it and label. Okay, so organizing, allowed. Now, in this one, it's not going to be a participle because the union was not organizing Alabama. So you said organizing Alabama as a territory, the union admitted, so in other words, well, I mean, I think, so if you want to look at the union as being some kind of
Because two people just.
state organization or some state government that help form it, but I think we're talking about the union being the union of colonies, right, United States. So be careful on that one because the union might have to do New York. So to admit Alabama, the union organized it as a territory, that would be more reasonable because the union would be the one who would find to admit it, right? Being organized, Alabama was not a gerund because gerunds don't take commas, right? But gerund would be, this is exactly something organized as a territory, being organized, both of these are commas and both of them are modifying Alabama. So you wrote two different types of participial phrases. You didn't write a gerund. Don't label the verb.
Okay.
Underline up to the verb. So now find a prepositional phrase. Yeah, you're doing a preposition. So through the process or whatever, that's you. Maybe label, underline up to the verb, underline up to the comma, right, in all those situations. So be careful on that to admit. Because who's doing the admitting? You're saying Alabama is doing the admitting, and that's not what's going on there, right? Organizing into a territory admits Alabama. So you're saying the act of organizing? I would say it, yeah, admitted. Yeah, admitted. No, I mean, is it gerund? So organizing admitted Alabama. I mean, okay. For the purpose of this exercise, yes, you're getting it. You've got an ing word and you've got a verb. But in terms of readability, that's what the struggle. Yeah, and those all make sense. All right, so organizing, allowed, being organized Alabama. To become state, Alabama, right, okay, good.
Organizing.
Yeah.
We're organized into a territory in 1817, Alabama.
Careful. Hey, just when you're doing that a positive, right, don't put a participle in between the commas, right? Just do the renaming. If you have an ed, d, t, n, ing word in between the commas, you have a participial phrase, not a positive phrase. Right? So if you're using a participial phrase to start your sentence, just putting that in the middle of the sentence with commas doesn't make it a positive. Right? That just makes it a participle that's non-essential. I mean, it's okay to have non-essentials, but let's use the positive. Okay, so Alabama, a territory, right? You did exactly what I was just talking about, but you take that out and now it's just a territory. Okay, so in the union phase, to be admitted as that was good. Okay, all right, so most of you are doing Alabama, so let's take a look at these. Okay. Use all 5 of them. So in the first one, right, the gerund, organizing Alabama in 1817. So the act of organizing allowed the territory admittance into the Union in 1819. Okay, that makes sense. Organizing allowed. Notice that she is labeled up to the verb. That's the gerund. Everybody see that? ing word acting as a subject, there's the verb. In this one, this is the participle. Now, label these, okay? So when you do this tell me what they are. Admitted in 1819, ED word describing Alabama, right? Who was admitted in 1819? Alabama was. That's the subject of the sentence. Admitted in 1819, Alabama was organized as a territory in 1817. She could even say organized as a territory in 1817, comma, Alabama was admitted to the Union in 1819. She can do it any way she wants. All she's got is an ED word acting as an adjective describing Alabama. Notice it's an introductory phrase. Up to the comma, she marks, right, to show me that that is the introductory element. Number 3, to be admitted to the Union, right? Here's the to plus verb combination. So to be admitted to the Union, Alabama was organized as a territory in 1817. So the to be admitted, who was being admitted? Alabama was. Adjective phrase again. One was an infinitive, one's a participle. In the prepositional phrase, we've got the word in, right? In, on, over, under, below, before. All those words that show relationship. So in the Union currently, comma, Alabama was organized in 1817 as a territory. Some people might write that introductory prepositional phrase as through the process of admittance, comma, Alabama first had to be organized as a territory or something like that. You can use anything you want in those prepositions, just make sure you've got to. Most of you already do this, right? So you know that you don't have much work to do, you just gotta go find them. So all of these 3 right here, introductory elements, right? Underline up to the comma to show the introductory elements. And the first one, the gerund, we're underlining the subject of the sentence, not underlining the verb, right? You're just underlining up to the verb. If you underline the verb, I'm going to mark it wrong because the verb is not a gerund. Right? You need to know the difference. And number 5, a positive phrase, right? So I've got my comma here, I've got my comma here. This group of words right here needs to rename this. So Alabama, a territory organized in 1817, was admitted to the Union in 1819. So a territory organized in 1817, that's renaming what Alabama was. Notice she couldn't say organized as a territory in 1817 because organized is an ED word, making it an adjective that becomes participial, right? So she crosses that out and she knows that I can't use that. It has to be a noun, renaming a noun. So her appositive phrase is a territory, and there is the appositive phrase. So she's going to underline what's in between the commas and mark that as a positive. All right? So a positive, prepositional, infinitive, participial, and gerund. All 5 of them. Let's go back to our example. Now, I want you to pick 2 or 3, and I want you to use all 3 independent clauses and combine these down using these phrases. But you've got to use all 3 of them. All right, so it's going to require that you manage this information in various ways. Still going to be gerund, prepositional, participial, infinitive, appositive. Just going to be a little bit more complicated because you've got 3 independent clauses to deal with. But everybody should recognize, yeah, short, choppy sentence structure. Virginia is nicknamed the Old Dominion. It was the oldest of the English colonies. It remained loyal to the king during the English Civil War. Choppy, choppy, choppy. Rhode Island is the smallest state. It has played a great part. It was a haven for individuals. Choppy, choppy, choppy. How do I know that? Every sentence starts in the same way. Subject, verb, subject, verb, subject, verb, subject, verb. Chop, chop, chop. Right? Not effective writing. So break the monotony. Get control over the information. Understand that when you're moving information around now, you're going to put more emphasis on certain pieces of information. So you better start thinking about what's important in this sentence. What do I want to maintain a position of an independent clause that's the most important part of the sentence, and what's the least important piece of information in here? Right? So now you've got all 3 levels you can operate with. You can have introductory elements, independent clauses, non-essential elements. You can start crafting some really cool sentences. Same process over again, just a more complicated sentence. No, because that is, you can do that all you want, but you're not gonna mark that as a positive, because a positive is a noun, meaning a noun. This is an adjective, so all you did was, let's look at your participial phrase, where's your participial?
Are we putting like a parent?
Organizing as a territory, ing word describing Alabama. Admitted to the union, ing word describing Alabama.
Okay, I do.
It's the same construction. Remember I just told the participles end in ing, t, d, dd, and n, right? There's your ed word. It's an adjective. All you did is, you know, this exact same sentence. You just moved this from your introductory element, putting it in commas in the middle of your sentence. It's the same thing. It's a participle here, it's a participle there, because of that ending. What you need to do is make this a noun, Alabama, and then rename what Alabama is. You're describing it. What she did was she said, Alabama, a territory, was a noun describing, renaming a noun. Sure, you can say a part of, right? Because a part is a noun. What's that? Okay, so being a professor, not a gerund, this is participle, right? Gerunds never take commas. You gotta have your subject, this has gotta be your subject. Being did something, there's gotta be a verb there. So being a professor of comparative literature did something for Dr. Jones. All right? Teaching comparative literature, Dr. Jones. So this one and this one are exactly the same, right? ing word, comma, they're both describing Dr. Jones, right? So they're both participles. Okay? To believe patterns I would his work with Dr. Jones was done. Good. Okay, so to believe, describing Dr. Jones. In the comparison, Dr. Jones believes, right? And then Dr. Jones, a professor, did something. Yeah. Okay. So the only one you haven't got is the gerund. You just did two parts. Oh, ing word is actually the subject of the sentence. Remember, it's the primary importance. It's the act of something caused something to happen. So being a professor caused something to happen. That's what you got at the end of that phrase, being a professor, you've got to give me a verb, not a comma. You can certainly use more than one phrase in a sentence. You are encouraged to use multiple phrases. I'm hoping that you get there to that point where you're using multiple phrases. Because if you are using multiple phrases, then you might have an introductory element, an independent clause with a non-essential element inside that independent clause, which would show the three levels of importance operating in one sentence. That would be exciting. You'll get there. I can't torture you, I'll get you there. So this is an interesting way of tackling the gerund, and I just want you to see something. And I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm saying this is actually a good tool for learning something here. All right, so the sentence begins here. Providing the haven for religious freedom caused Rhode Island to play an important role in American history, right? So there's the gerund. Providing a haven for religious freedom caused something to happen, right? So I get that. I see that nice relationship between the providing, causing something. But look at the end. Comma, even though it's the smallest state. And I'm just like, that seems to just, at the end of a sentence is where we want our most important pieces of information, right? To end the sentence with that non-essential element, you can do it, but you should be transitioning to now a conversation about the state's smallness in that conversation, because you've now just put this at the end of a sentence where we know that's the most important piece of information. Right? So you're kind of subverting the order of things. You're taking something that's non-essential and you're tacking it on to the end of the sentence, and now I get to the end of that sentence and I'm like, well, now where do I go? Because the most important thing was that providing caused something to happen, and then all of a sudden there's this disruptive thing about the smallness. So am I going to have a conversation about the smallness, or am I going to have the conversation about providing caused something to happen? See the problem there? When you end a sentence, right, what should be ending a sentence is your important pieces of information. That's the thing that your reader's going to retain. She can manage this in a different way, right? She can take that smallest state bit, and she can stick it right up here as a non-essential element. She can say, providing the haven for religious freedom caused Rhode Island, comma, the smallest state in the Union, comma, to become an important role and to play an important role in American history, right? Because the smallest state bit is, she's telling us right off the bat, this is not important. Look, it's even got a comma here setting it off as a non-essential element. So take that non-essentialness and stick it in the middle of a sentence and disrupt the flow of the sentence in the middle to alert the reader, hey, this isn't really important. Good. Yeah, good mistake to make. We're learning. Why are you putting these independent clause in here, right? Why don't you say allow Virginia, comma, the oldest of those colonies, comma, to be nicknamed, right? Because you want to say allow Virginia to do something. And you said allow Virginia, that is the oldest, and now all of a sudden I'm focused on this essential element because you're trying to think, is the oldest of it important? Probably not. It's the fact that it was nicknamed Old Dominion, or maybe that's not important. Maybe you need to put this as a non-essential element and say Virginia nicknamed Old Dominion was the oldest. I don't know, something. Manage it appropriately. Put the important pieces of information in an independent clause. Okay. Remaining loyal to the king caused Virginia to be nicknamed the Old Dominion. There you go. Nice cause and effect. Put that. Good. That's a preposition. But it really doesn't even count as a preposition because the ing word is the opposite word of the sentence. It's not really showing a relationship. Remain loyal to the king during the Civil War, Virginia. Yeah, I mean, here's the problem. Your independent clause is Virginia is the oldest. So, hey folks, take a look at this. This is what I was talking about making your independent clauses the most important piece of information. This does the job, right? This is, in order, if I'm just telling you to complete a task, then this completes the task. But look at the focus on the independent clause. All right, so let's take a look at this, whether this is a participial phrase. So remaining loyal to the king during the English Civil War, introductory participial phrase. Virginia, comma, nicknamed the Old Dominion, comma, is the oldest of the English colonies. So if we're having a conversation about just telling useful facts about Virginia and we want to focus on Virginia being the oldest of the English colonies, then this is a sentence for you, right? But I don't think this is about, the most important thing is about Virginia being the oldest, right? I think there's other things going on here, right? And what we're doing is we're taking these important pieces of information, it's loyalty to the king, it's being named the Old Dominion, right? Those things, maybe, you know, those things, its age, all those things cause Virginia to take on this role in history. This says Virginia is the oldest of the English colonies. And I'm just sitting here going, yeah, it does the job. It's got a non-essential element here. Now that's not a positive, right? Because of the ed word there, right? That's an adjective, that's participial. So she's got two participial phrases here, one that's introductory, one that's non-essential. She's not marking this one because that needs to be in a positive, right? But she's still got the, you know, the things are there. The independent clause, I don't know if that's the focus of the sentence. It might be. I'm just telling you, you got to be careful as to what you're putting emphasis on. And that's the key to this whole exercise, is to recognize that you're emphasizing certain things over the others, by putting certain information in certain locations and putting things in independent clauses versus non-essential elements versus introductory elements, your location and purpose define importance. Are we running out of time? Yeah, we're out of time. All right, look, we'll get back to this on